Hey everyone, Matt Sear here, CEO of AFN. At AFN, our central belief is that change is where opportunity happens. And the best way to find opportunity in change is a network that is diverse in experience, expertise, and perspective. We bring groups of subject matter experts together to talk about things that really expand our thinking. Today, we've got three great leaders with us, and we're going to talk about advocacy, activism, and leadership amid a lot of the global challenges that we see out there. And as I was talking to our chief of staff, Betsy, before this, one of the things that we ended up hitting on was this idea of respect, and that we consistently want to be showing respect to other people, but how you get there and how you actually display respect, how you make sure that that is known to people is something that is complicated, that we can not always get right, but we try really hard to be able to do as leaders. Today, our panelists with us are Laura Maasdam. She's co-founder and she's an executive performance coach and negotiation speaker at Sixth Wing. She's a veteran of the U.S. Navy, good friend of mine who I've known for maybe 20 years now. Megan Jaffer. She is co-founder, executive producer, and creative director at Iron Butterfly Media, and she is a longtime veteran of the intelligence community. And Fang, founder and CEO of Divinia. She's an experienced technologist and innovator in the natural language processing and practical applications of artificial intelligence. So really, really good people. Thank you guys for being here. We're going to have a really good discussion. And I'm just going to start diving into some questions for us. So when we're thinking about this idea of respect, and part of this is, when we're thinking about our own companies, we've got to help people understand what's important to us as a company, but also thinking about what's important to those individuals. So how do we figure out what's important to the people that are working for us? Laura, let's start with you. How do you understand what's important to the people that are working for you?
I think when I think about respect and when I think about understanding what's important to people and the way we structure our organization is we really spend a lot of time on the individual. Sometimes that means in an hour-long meeting, we're spending the first 30 minutes really diving into what's going on with them professionally, personally, really caring about the whole person. And it is really woven into the fabric of our organization that it's really about people and not just the product. It's not just about what we're producing. It's really about how we're interacting, because we created Sixth Wing so that it was a place that people really wanted to come, that supported the lives that we have outside of work as well. So whether you have young kids, aging parents, sick siblings, whatever it might be, it's really important to us that everybody is treated like a human being. And so that means sometimes that we might be a little bit less efficient in how we run a meeting, because we really care about spending time knowing one another. And it's a huge part of how we do our weekly meetings, how we do our bi-monthly meetings, how we do our quarterly offsites, that we build in a lot of time to understand how an individual is doing, what's going on in their life, what they need, what type of support they need from members on our team. And it's really important to us that we have that ability to adjust based on whatever season of life or phase of life that one of our teammates might be in. And so I think that as I hear the word respect, to me, it is about, I want to respect who you are as a person, what you need in life, and then how that applies to what you're able to give at work as well. And I think that they're so intertwined.
Okay, great. So I talk about frequently time being a scarce resource. So you're saying, hey, this is an investment of time that we're making in every person that's out there. I think if you've got a scarce resource and you're investing in people, that's a reasonable signal that you're trying to get to know them well. Mm-hmm. Megan, what would you add to that?
So, we run our companies in a parallel way. And so what I would add on top of what Laura said is, the simple answer is we ask them, right? We ask them. We are a very small company in more of the early stages of our company. And so everyone who works for us is a 1099. They're doing this alongside a full-time job, alongside going to school, grad school full-time, alongside family, other things. And so we recognize that, and that always comes first. We recognize that their family, their schooling, their full-time job is what is sustaining them, right? And so we ask them, what is important to them. We're very lucky that we can sit down also in our bi-weekly meetings. We have also our one-on-ones and also our twice a year offsites, where we say, do you like what you're doing? What would you like to bring to the table that we're not doing? We still are in this very nimble stage where we can shift and we can change and we can bring in new ideas. And I think that's what makes working with us kind of exciting, is that they can come to us and say, you know what, this is important to me. I like doing these things. I'd like to focus here, and we can work with that.
Okay. So dialogue is an important thing, and engagement is just like, hey, making sure that we're asking the question, but that you are taking the time to give us feedback back. G, how else would you say that we try and identify what's important to the people that are working for us?
Yeah, I think what Laura and Megan said is more as kind of from the management side. You need to take the initiatives to ask people, right? So what's important, and then sometimes it's, even if it takes a lot of time, maybe in the meeting, to figure that out. I definitely do the same, and then I firmly believe it's actually worth the investment. Definitely is worth it, because I personally notice whenever for Divinia, we run a globally distributed, it's all remote. So, but whenever I ask people, or people feel like they are asked about what they value, what's important to them, even like about their family, their life, I notice obviously a kind of like a immediately increased sense of bond. So, and then you will also notice that kind of feeling and the correlation between that and then the performance. People just feel like more bonded, and they feel like they are working almost for their own family, right? So, but that's one direction. Another, so on top of that, I think, Matt, you ask what else, right? So will tell us. I think sometimes I also notice like from people's performance. And sometimes if people, you feel like somebody, maybe they are not as performing as good as before, there may be a reason related to whether they feel like they are fulfilled. So that's also a good time to check with them. Like Megan said, are you happy? Right. So is there anything that is missing? So I think from both direction, well, we can check whether people are getting things that are important for them. And I firmly believe that actually people needs to have that sense that they are working on something that is important to them, or all of the values they cherish is reflected, is in the right place in order for them to deliver really high performance.
So, as leaders, we think consistently like, oh, your job is to set the vision. Part of what you're saying, G, is observation's pretty key. We got to be watching what's going on with people consistently. Okay, so we got a few ideas on how we're figuring out what's important to people. When we're thinking about what's important to the organization, obviously we're trying to make sure that these two things can align. It's just like, hey, what's important to you? What's important to us as the organization? How do we make sure that our team members understand what's important to our organization, Megan?
So for us, when we were putting together our values, we included the team, right? We had that discussion with our initial team when we were putting together our company values, and it always goes back to that. I think for us, we're a little eccentric in a company, and so our values are belief, authenticity, and love. And you don't hear that a lot coming from a company, especially a media company. Using the word love is probably a little eccentric. But we always come back to that. And so when we're talking about what's important to us as a company, and we're asking whether, my co-founder, Katie, and I are talking about it, or we're talking about it with the larger group, we always revert back to that. Does it fit in those boxes? Is this what we're projecting as a company? And if it does, that's how that we reiterate that over and over to our team, to ourselves, and to new people that come on, and to the people who represent us. So our advisory committee, we call them the monarchs, people who are speaking on our behalf. This idea of belief, authenticity, and love, it always comes back to that.
Well, and values, they're so important in terms of setting that foundation. Like, in the absence of actually telling someone what they should do, they should be able to go back to the values and say, like, okay, if I'm adhering to the values, that makes sense. And one thing I think that Iron Butterfly has done spectacularly is, making it easy for people to understand the consistency of what you're doing. Even using the word monarch. All right, Iron Butterfly, you make the connection on monarch. It's just like, hey, people are able to think about, they can see where the through line is on all of this. Laura, how do you let folks know what's important to Sixth Wing?
I agree with a lot of what Megan just said. And I think Bridget, my business partner, co-founder, we had a really exciting opportunity last year to think through our branding again. So we founded Sixth Wing, I think it's been almost 9 years, which is wild. And when we founded it based on the principle that we wanted to make a difference in the world and to help move people forward. And it needed to fit with our lives. We had kids at all different ages. And so we became business owners, not because we wanted to be entrepreneurs, but because it's what fit with our life to have the impact that we wanted to have. And over the years, we've grown, we've brought on these incredible teammates. And a year ago, we went through a rebranding process to kind of refresh from that napkin drawing that we had done 9 years ago. And it was a wonderfully illuminating process, as well as reassuring and validating to what we had been doing all along. So came up with our 6 principles that back who we are as a company and what we stand for in delivering excellence, in really focusing on the human. And then 4 others. Megan, you did such a good job of remembering all 3. I'm like, I'd have to pull up a list. But I think that as we went through that process, it was really important for us to share with our team what we were coming up with, and then to think about how we put that into action. And it's been a lot of fun going through that rebrand, having those values and those pieces of who we are and what makes us tick brought back to the surface, so that we can constantly use that as our North Star, as our lighthouse, and check in on, are we heading in the right direction? Does this decision fall in line with what we want to be doing more of and who we are? And just kind of constantly checking in on that foundation so that our team stays true to who we are as individuals and to what it is that we're trying to accomplish.
So, I mean, one of the things that came across for me is you're saying, hey, we're not just talking about our values here. Here's examples of how we work to fulfill those as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
G, anything you would add there in terms of letting people know what's important to the organization?
Yeah, maybe I can just share a little bit of the process we do in terms of how we align the importance of our goal. I think at Divinia is mostly done through the communication about the process of goal setting and the planning. So basically, our majority of our team members, they are researchers or engineers, right? So and then I think like we kind of as I mentioned, it's a global team as well. I think like it's very important for people to understand why we are working on something. So basically a clear communication of like the higher goal, the business goal. And with that, we also kind of have a check on, okay, we want to achieve this as a business, but does this violate our culture? Does this align with our culture, our principle? Right. So even sharing that clearly with the team, and then also encourage them to challenge if they see a, discrepancy, or if they have any question, why are we working on this? Right. So from that also down to from that higher business goal, you can decompose it then to more like the goals for each staff team, and then all the way down to each single ticket everybody is working every day. So, and also, so it's kind of we do a lot of reminding why we are working on this in our daily meeting. So I have to, oftentimes I would just point out how important this thing is related to the higher goal, and also encourage people. One thing I love saying to people is, I would appreciate if you don't understand why you are working on something, or you think it's not really a good thing to do, bring it up. And, those kind of encourage those kind of behavior, making sure everybody is aligned. That's how we kind of do it, because otherwise sometimes it's easier for people to sit down and just working on a single ticket. I'm developing this little library today, but forgot why they are doing it. And then they also, that can lead to actually bad performance, because they don't understand the higher goal. Because oftentimes you may have 10 different ways of doing it, but there is one way that is good for your goal. So that's why we actually really take a lot of time trying to get that alignment.
Right. You got to feel connected to what's going on. And you guys have all three of you have very different companies. Laura, you're a services company. Megan, you're a media company. G, you are a technology company. I wanted to dive in just a little bit further, thinking about, what is important to your companies. And I think that all of you share fairly similar values, knowing all of you. But one thing that I think is really interesting, G, if you could just talk about, specific to Divinia, part of what you talk about is the value of information to the ecosystem and people getting legitimate information. Can you just talk a little bit about how you think about the information ecosystem and what Divinia is doing to support that?
Sure. Yeah. So I think actually Megan used the word I really like, authentic. I think the same right now, actually in the world, we really have no short of information, but there are authentic information, there are fake information. I think one thing that is really important for Divinia is to actually deliver a product that actually gives users really authentic information, helping them to make kind of a really good decision. And also, we know that sometimes bigger companies, those giants, sometimes they have an advantage of they have so much information. They can use the signal sometimes to produce something. Maybe it's harder for people who has less background in those fields to tell whether something is true or not, right? So and then so that's something we try to fight. We try to fight for people. So and then to deliver the truth to people. So that's kind of very important to us. That's also part of our company value and the culture. The first thing is be true, not only as a person. So that's actually the number one principle for our company. Be true as a person, be true as a business, be true for all of our products.
Well, and again, I think that the idea of going back to respect. So there's a lot of respect for the consumer that's out there. It's just like, hey, they deserve to have good information. I think Megan, same as what you're doing, Laura, you're respecting the end user or your coachees as well. It's just like, hey, how are they actually, using something to help them to their best benefit. So when we think about, we talked about it's really important for our team members to show that we respect them, that we're understanding what's important to them. We're talking about what's important to the organization. There are times where those two may not align well, or they may come into conflict with each other. And there's things that happen in the news daily where someone on our team might say, hey, why aren't we weighing in on this? This is something that's really important to me. You said you care about me. Why isn't the organization saying that they care about it? Laura, how do we suss out those things that we ought to be talking about as an organization versus saying, hey, I care about you as an individual, and we can talk about that within our four walls?
It's such a good question. I was like, give this one to Megan. She's in media. Give this one to her. Okay, so I'll give it a shot and then I'll hand it to Megan. It's interesting because as I was thinking about the media ahead of time and thinking about what comes up in the news, the way that I think that we really look at it inside of Sixth Wing is what matters most to our clients. And so rarely is the news showing up inside of our team. I would say it's more showing up in if our clients are in the hedge fund industry and we're looking at the markets on Friday and yesterday, like it's being aware of how that's impacting our clients, because one of the things that's most important to how we work and provide our services, it's really about holding space for others. What matters to them, what's going on in their world. And so for us to be aware enough to recognize the impact and why they might be showing up the way they are in our calls with them. And so I think that for us, it's also about having the self-awareness, the self-regulation, the ability to kind of exercise self-leadership, so that if something is happening in the news that is impacting us individually, but we're showing up with a client, how can we still hold that space for them, knowing what's going on for all of us? And I would like to think that we hold space in our team meetings to talk about that. It's interesting because most of the time I feel like we're talking about our clients, we're talking about our personal lives. And so the news and the crises that are happening in the world are showing up in our conversations with our clients more. So having that awareness.
Yeah.
Okay, well, Megan, tag team, it's going to you now.
Just one comment I can make it real quick is just like when you're thinking about being a coach, subordinating your ego is so important. And so the client focused, I'd say, is a very difficult challenge.
Yeah.
Megan.
And I think that's the balance, right? Of like what's important to me and what's important to them. And I think you just said it perfectly.
Sorry, well, Megan, go ahead. I'm so glad you went first because this was the question I had mentioned before we started recording that I was really thinking hard about how to answer. So the throwaway, not throwaway, but the easy answer is, we started our company, the foundation of our company was the intelligence community and national security space. It is now grown bigger than that. But the intelligence community and the national security space is supposed to be apolitical. So we don't touch politics at all because everyone that we're interviewing, everything that we're discussing is supposed to be apolitical. So that's kind of the easy answer for the political things that are in the news. Our company is focused on lifting the voices of women and minorities. So like you, Laura, we look at that. And actually, Matt has helped me a lot to think about that, about how we do that and when to do that. So in the beginning, we were a little conservative because we weren't sure where we should speak and when we should speak. And what I've learned is, we are now a voice in this ecosystem and we should be using our voice. And I think what has happened, through starting this company and actually joining AFN, I promise I'm not being paid to say this, Matt, is that I have found my superpower and my voice, which is feeling more confident in speaking on women's issues and minority issues and not being afraid to do so. And understanding that, you know, if I can't speak on all women and or minority issues, but having educated people either educate me or speak on our behalf, to do so. And that makes us feel confident in what we're projecting. I don't know if that answers your question, but that's my addition.
Well, I think you're very clear on what's important to your organization and making sure that the people who you said in the beginning, when we're bringing people in, it's pretty clear that they want to be working at Iron Butterfly because they want to be associated with that particular mission.
And brand, I guess.
Yeah. But I think, you know, you very importantly, you said, hey, I actually don't know everything. It turns out we can't know everything. And so being willing to listen to others around it is pretty darn important.
Well, we started our company in COVID, but, you know, I'll just be quite frank. If we had started the company, you know, 6 months earlier, let's say, and that was when our country was going through a lot of civil strife with George Floyd happening. And I would not speak as a white woman from our company. I would make sure that I was educated and I would bring in my African-American, partners, our monarchs, to speak on Iron Butterfly's behalf, knowing that you have to know what's appropriate, right? And when to speak and when to use others to speak on your behalf.
Yeah, I don't want to downplay the complications here, because even we had Jim Rotman on last week. He is head of essentially DE&I for Volvo in Europe, and he talked about the fact that they actually literally cannot talk about race at all by law, and so when they're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, they have to they can talk about ethnicity, they can talk about nationality, but they're not allowed to talk about race. And that is like an interesting restriction where it's very easy to say, well, why aren't you talking about this? And it's like, well, I can't. I have to find another way to speak about that. So when we're thinking about this idea of those things that one of your team members might say, hey, this is really important, and it's not one of those central tenets that's around Divinia, how do you decide to speak to that or not speak to that as a company?
I think for that is in the current stage of Divinia, it's quite simple because we have the culture, company principles. We have 3: be true, be kind, be brave, right? So most of I think the first 2 is pretty important for this kind of decision. So if there is one thing that is important for the team, let's just say if we want to make a voice to the external world, so if there is no, clearly there is no violation of the company value, and it's actually strengthened it. So one example would be okay, so recent years there are a lot of different voices in terms of what AI can do, right? So there is obviously a lot of excitement, but also a lot of misinformation, or a lot of information making this field almost unnecessarily mysterious. So if, as a company, we do kind of discuss, the importance of kind of sharing some more truthful information, even as a citizen of the world, right? So sharing the knowledge is important. So that would be something everybody would be encouraged to do, right? So I think, of course, you don't want to be spreading anything that will do harm to any other people, because we really kind of believe be kind is important. Yeah. So, and also be brave sometimes plays into it. As a small company, do you want to go out and say, hey, it's like there was too much hype about OpenAI, ChatGPT. So is that going to do you any good as a small business, right? So those kind of decisions we will kind of like have discussion, but in the end, sort of the guiding line is our culture, our value. Yeah.
Great. So when we think about, the concept of crisis, so, it could be, an individual within our team could be feeling something as a crisis. We could be seeing something in the news that feels like a crisis. When there's something to that level, it makes us feel like, the decisions are entirely binary. Either we do something or we don't, right? Your opportunity to look at the universe of possibilities go down when you think about crisis. Laura, how do you guys think about crisis at Sixth Wing, and how does that impact, the voice that you guys speak with?
Hold on, let me unmute first. I think that when I think about crisis, it's on a couple of different levels. Is it crisis that's occurring in the world that's really impacting our teammates? It might be impacting our clients, and how do we want to show up to really hold space for that? It could be crisis in terms of something that's personally happening for one of us. And I also think that we are a team that is primarily service academy grads, military backgrounds. We all have like a really strong bias to action. We are really good at saying like, all right, there's a crisis, let's handle it, let's take action. And so sometimes that bias to action needs to be dialed back and we need to pause. I'm mostly talking about myself here. I think that I'm in a crisis. I love to move forward and I love to move fast. And sometimes it's important to slow down and to pause and to really check on the steps that we're taking and making sure that those are in line with who we are and what we want to achieve. So when I think about it on these two different wavelengths of, is it a client crisis or is it an internal to Sixth Wing crisis? I think we are really big believers of, we always want to meet our clients where they are. And so we might show up ready to facilitate a conversation on a specific subject, but if something in the world is happening, as did many months ago, when everything was really at the beginning and the hilt of things happening in Palestine and Israel, some of our conversations that we showed up to just became holding space for what was going on with all of those individuals on the call. And I think it feels very important to us that as we think about each person that we work with being a human being whose feelings are true and valid, that means that we pivot, we meet them where they are, and we hold that space. Internal to our company, I think that one of the things that we really hold dear and true is that when somebody is in a crisis, a personal crisis, we want to support them. And that was me 2 years ago when my sister got sick and passed away. The whole team stepped up. That was my personal crisis. Bridget had a personal crisis with her mom passing away, like whatever it might be, whether it's having children, whether it's taking care of aging parents. It's really about how do we make sure that that person feels as supported as they can through whatever that crisis is? Because, it's hard as a human being to say that what somebody else is experiencing is or is not a crisis. So we just want to show up in support and being that safe space and that open space for it. That was a long answer, Matt.
No, it's great. But since you mentioned it,
yes,
you said you have a bias to action and you need to work to slow yourself down. How are you slowing yourself down?
Oh, Matt. Well, I would say because I'm trying to think about this a lot of different ways. Everything as simple as trying to breathe to slow myself down. There's a great podcast where Brene Brown, Adam Grant, and Simon Sinek got on, and they were talking about how if you put your hands together, it slows down your speaking. So I practice that sometimes. And I think that empowering those around me to name it when they see it, because oftentimes I think other people see it before I do. And on our team, it's lovingly referred to as go mode. And people can say, hopefully, I hope people feel like they can say, like, Laura, you're in go mode. Let's slow down a little bit, because it is a tendency of mine. And I also hope that through awareness and coaching and therapy and all of the supports that can exist, I'm learning how to slow down and be more self-aware in those moments.
Very cool. So like figuring out a way to break the pattern. I've started watching The Bear recently, and they have their when they've gotten a little too heavy with each other, they do the sign language for I'm sorry, and that really breaks them out of the pattern.
Right. Yeah,
Megan.
I think it takes the team to break patterns. It's hard. Yeah. You can do it on your own, but it's easier with a team of people around you.
Very cool.
So I could totally relate to Laura. And there's not too much to add in addition to what she already said. But, we recently, it's interesting because we have, we're outward facing. We're a media company. We share stories. People learn about us. They learn about the women that are featured on all of our podcasts. And they look at us in some cases as a safe space. And recently we had someone external, did not work for us, but in our community, come to us in crisis. And like Laura, my, gut visceral reaction is action, right? What can we do? How can we help her? This is an injustice. Like, how do we make it right? And like you, what is beautiful about having a partner, a co-founder, is having that other person to say, slow down, or, in my case, I give a lot of myself. I give more than I think other people think I should. Which can affect other parts of my company, other parts of me, and having someone else say, okay, we can help this person. This person's in crisis. Our community now feels like we're a safe space where they can come and share these things, but you have to protect yourself as well. And kind of know the things you can help with and know the things you can't. And so having that mirror almost is extremely, extremely helpful. And that's kind of internally the way you were putting it, Laura. I liked it. And then externally, the crisis, if there's a crisis externally, we're kind of lucky. We can use our platform, right? And so if it fits in with who we are as a company, we can gather, we can speak, we can share, we can bring in community and talk about the issue at hand, the crisis at hand. So those are my two additions.
Awesome. G, anything you would add there?
I think the only thing it's the same in spirit, but I think I may kind of just share a little bit of my own learning about how to handle the crisis. Is also different kinds of crisis. I think my way is to basically try to remove the word crisis from my vocabulary. So just treat it, just learn. I mean, feelings, cannot completely remove it, like feeling frustrated or frightened. All those feelings will always be there, but try to learn to treat crisis is just an event. Regardless, internally or externally, there are events happening in the world, and then crises are normally events that may be leading to some potential risk for parties, right? So, and then it's pretty important to just to try to use that to not to be too impacted by the feelings, and then rather than focusing on, what can you do, a solution to mitigate that risk So that's like another thing that is helpful to learn over the years is sky won't fall, right? So everything will move on. And then if we just do a little bit more, what we can do to get a better results. So that helps. Yeah.
Reframing is what I'm hearing. It's just like, hey, how do we help people think about this? My mother-in-law once told me it'll all be all right in the end. If it's not all right, it's not the end. So that's what I try and think of. What I want to do now is I want to invite our audience to be able to ask questions. We are recording, so if you're not comfortable with coming up on video, I would ask that you put your questions in the chat. If you are comfortable coming up on video, please do so and ask a question. I am always prepared to ask more questions. So giving you guys space to come up right now if you would like to. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, first, ladies, I love the conversation. And all three of you are creating companies that I think we could use many, many more of in the world, because you're creating such great cultures amongst your teams. And I was recently having some conversations with folks who worked in Formula One and some other really demanding industries where people view these companies, these teams, as high performing. And what I realized in talking with some folks is there's a difference between high performing teams and high performance teams. From the conversations and what you shared, all three of you are creating high performance teams. So I was wondering if one of you could share a time and talk with us about the moment when you realized that the culture you were creating and the team dynamics you wanted to create, you recognized it happened without you having to intervene, i.e. something happened in the company, somebody took action that they didn't talk to you about, they just did. And when you found out about it, we're like, great, things are setting in, this is happening. Can you share a time that happened?
I can go. I am trying to think off my feet, like when a good example. I think a good example is actually probably recently. We have gone from a small project that was one podcast and 3 people to 3 podcasts, a documentary, and 7 employees. And I would love to say that everything was planned and organized in this very structured way because that's who I am. But as we all know, that is not what happens. And I think in the past, really 2 months, we went from 1 podcast to 3. We went from 4 to 7. And it was just kind of, now thinking back, one of the things I love to do, as I hate calling myself a leader, it's so weird, but as a leader is I like to reflect at the end of the year. Everyone does like a newsletter and to send out to their, whether it's their stakeholders, constituents, whoever. I do it because I like to think about what we've actually accomplished, and because we're always looking forward, right? And I want the team to look at everything, we're always thinking, what's next goal, but looking back. And I think in the last a few months is that no one was really told what to do. They all just kind of took charge in their areas, right? We have social media, we have a producer, we have an editor, we have an, engagement person, we have a new podcast host, and everyone, it wasn't that, Katie, my co-founder, and I said, you must do this and we got to figure out this. They all just kind of took on ownership. And I think just saying this out loud, not even reflecting, previously on this, because obviously we just heard the question, is I think that shows the culture of our workforce, is that they feel empowered and that we want them to feel that way. We don't want to tell them, you should be doing this and you should be doing this. We want them to take the bull by the horns and just go. And that's really happened. And we wouldn't have been able to go from 1 to 3 or 5 to 7 without them doing that. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that was the first thing that came to mind.
I thought that was a great example, and I agree with you. You know that the culture is set when you aren't directing folks to do things. Stuff's just happening. When a crisis hits, things just happen. People know what to do and start acting. And I always told my team, hey, we can always unring a bell. As long as we can unring the bell, like, life is good. We'll change course if we need to. But the first goal is, if it's within these left and right lateral limits, and I can't remember who touched on earlier, the values you said, as long as it's within these values, go execute. So I thought that was a great answer. Great example.
G or Laura, anything you'd like to add?
Well, I'm glad that Megan went first, because I was going to answer it in a little bit different direction. And I think Megan was closer to the question that Jason asked. I think empowerment is something that we're really working on inside of our team right now, and something that's probably very currently front of mind for us. So where I was thinking, Jason, as you asked this question, as a moment that showed up for me, where I thought, like, oh, wow, we have really created something special and we are part of something special, is I think it was our last team offsite. We love to do offsites in beautiful locations that involve spa days. But when we were at our offsite, one of the exercises that we went through was this, like, okay, dreamy. If in 5 years from now, we could do anything, there are no limits. It was really amazing to see how much of what people wanted was to share what we have created inside of our team. Like, how do we bring this to other women, bring this to other teams? And so it was a moment where I felt like our team was reflecting, like, what we have is something really special, and how we do it is really special. And how can we give this to other people? So it was a aha moment for me of, like, just to pause and to celebrate this amazing team that exists and how we work together. And that felt like a moment of seeing through other people's eyes what they appreciated, and that it was what we had. Yeah.
Yeah, very cool. Yeah, when everybody recognizes this is the team and we want to take this to others, again, I think that's when you recognize that we build a high performance team that recognizes what's special about us and we have something to give. I thought that was a great answer. G, how about you? One more.
Yeah.
Looking for an answer from you.
Yeah, when you asked the question, the first example that came to my mind was, like, when my team can be down to the individual engineer, when they ask question, why am I doing this? Right? So why are we working on this? And when people ask those questions, or they will say, is this actually aligned with our culture? I felt like, okay, so that's like I'm happy, right? So I know it's those values are settled into people's mindset, and also we have a culture that people. So we basically feel people don't feel scared of asking those questions. That reflects our culture, to be true, to be kind, to be brave, right? So
great answer. I think that summarizes it very well. When you create a culture where people can ask questions and feel safe to ask questions, and they want to understand the why, not because they're trying to derail something. They genuinely want to make sure that, hey, does this fit in with what we're trying to do? Another great answer. Thanks, Jeff.
thank you.
We did have one question that's in the chat, and this was specific to G. So thinking about, we talked about being a good digital citizen, thinking about the information overload that we've got out there. What do you think we all most need to be thinking about as individual digital citizens when things are changing so fast? So G, what do you think?
Yeah, this is such a great question. Honestly, this actually is a question makes me kind of both motivated at what I'm doing. Sometimes I also felt a little bit helpless. I firmly believe the harm of misinformation is so big not only to individuals' cognitive process, it's bad for the global, for the global culture, right? So, you know, I think like all I want to do is actually through my work or my influence, if we can help more people to understand the potential danger of this, and also to help people to have a better skill at kind of recognizing which information is, don't just blindly believing what's out there, right? So that's going to be bad. And people need to be trained, need to have the skill to tell what's true, what's not true, what's a critical thinking. That requires education and requires a way to raise people's awareness. As a digital citizen, we should all by ourselves, we should have those skills. We should also be try to influence people. But sometimes I honestly felt a little bit helpless as well, because also it's true, people choose things they want to believe. That's a true human kind of like just the nature. It's a really difficult thing to battle with, right? So sometimes it's obviously misinformation. If you put that in front of people, you can present the entire evidence, the logic, but people want to believe what they want to decide to believe. How do we actually overcome that? That's like sometimes gives me a sense of helpless, but I still, even if that's true, I think as a digital citizen, let's all do our share of work. Hopefully the world will become better just over time. Yeah.
Great. We all have responsibility around that. Sylvia, we'll give you the last question for folks.
Thanks, Matt. Thank you, ladies. Thank you for sharing this wonderful hour with us and giving us all these wonderful knowledge. I have a quick question, but might be a long answer, but unfortunately we don't probably have enough time for. As female entrepreneur, I'm curious to know if you can think back on the final moment when you decided that you're going to start your own company. What was the final push for all of you?
For me, it's just the desire of making impact. So before I started to getting into kind of even the industry, I was academic. So I was a researcher. I was teaching at the university. I was doing research in research labs. So, and then there is some impact of that through publications, but I wanted for me to eventually to become entrepreneur, it's more the desire of making more real world impact.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would second what G said. It was really about impact. My business partner and I, Bridget, we were both doing executive coaching and we both loved it and the impact that it had. And we were thinking about how do we do this and have it fit in our lives? She has 3 boys. I have 2 boys. They're very different in age. And so we wanted to be able to have an impact in a way that also fit with our lives and our husbands who were all over the world and traveling for their work at the time. And so that's how we made that decision. I can actually remember being at dinner, the 4 of us, Bridget and myself and our husbands, and her husband was like, you guys should start a company. And we thought, wait, what? We don't want to be business owners. We had never thought about that. And it just made sense. So it happened because we wanted to have that impact and we wanted it to fit with our lives. And boy, am I glad we did.
We transitioned a hobby into a career. That's the simple answer. You know, we had a hobby that we loved and we were able to transition that into a company. And the reason we did it actually goes back to something G was saying earlier about kind of misinformation and you know, and we wanted to change a narrative. We wanted to and to promote truth and we thought the only way to do that was, well, one of the ways, not the only way to do that, is to create a connection. And so, you know, in our case, when you think about the national security space and the intelligence community, you think of Hollywood, you think of James Bond, you think of gun-toting men drinking martinis. And we thought, how, you know, and when you think more broadly, the trust in government is not great right now. And so how do you combat that? How do you change people's the narrative around that? And the way to do that is to create connection. And so to show the real faces and the real stories behind these women. And maybe, just maybe, you see yourself in that person. And then you realize that, oh, wait, it's not what I actually thought. And so I just wanted to add one more thing. I know you didn't ask this specifically, Sylvia, but I think we could all, hopefully I can speak for the three of us in saying that, you know, what's important to my co-founder and I now is to let other women know that we believe that all women are creators, whether you're, you know, creating something out of your basement, you know, baking cookies and selling them to the local farmers market, or you're creating a company like G's, right? And that you can learn anything and you can do anything. And so it's just about perseverance. And so if you want to start a company, you actually can. It's not as difficult as, I mean, there's going to be bumps and there are things to do, but to get started, it's actually not that hard. And so I would encourage any woman that if that's where they're headed, they should go for it.
So reach out to us and we'll help you.
Thank you, ladies. I don't know if I'm that close yet, but I am so excited to know that I've got, you gals got my back. In particular, actually, Megan, I'm particularly looking forward to catching up to some of the podcasts that you have. So looking forward to learning more as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Sylvia.
Unsurprisingly, the time went by fast. You guys were amazing today. Thanks so much for sharing your perspective. And really looking forward to talking to all of you again soon. The recording, we will be putting this up on our AFN channel on YouTube, so the rest of the world can hear the great things that you guys had to say.
Thank you, Matt.
Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks.